The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Mike Morrison is the leader and founder of SocialNext, a premier digital marketing event organization that hosts some of Canada's most influential conferences, including Social West, Social East, Social Pacific, and SocialNext Toronto. With a passion for fostering community and professional growth, Mike has dedicated his career to curating events that bring together marketers, industry leaders, and innovators from across the country. Mike's expertise lies in crafting immersive event experiences that blend cutting-edge content with inclusive networking opportunities. His hands-on approach ensures that every SocialNext event delivers practical strategies, thought-provoking discussions, valuable takeaways, and each event is tailored to the evolving needs of attendees. Mike's commitment to accessibility sets his events apart, removing VIP barriers and providing equal opportunities for learning and growth. Through his work, he continues to champion diversity, inclusivity, and sustainability in the event space, while also embracing innovation areas like AI, influencer marketing, and creative storytelling. Whether it's organizing a sold-out conference or designing new ways for attendees to connect, Mike brings a unique blend of creativity, strategy, and passion to event planning, making him a sought-after voice in the industry. Welcome back, everyone, to the Connector Next Door. I have been having such fantastic conversations already. This fall is just brimming with so many cool connectors that you are getting to meet. We can learn as planners how to be better connectors and how to bring connections into the heart of and at the foundation of our planning. I have a special guest here today. Mike, I'm so glad that we have a chance to talk. Our first contact, you had no idea we had a contact, but I'm going to share a little bit of that.
I'm excited to hear it.
But first, welcome here. I'm so glad you're here to have this chat.
I'm so excited to talk about this stuff. I love this stuff, and I don't have enough people to talk to about it, so I'm excited.
Well, I'm always here, even after.
Right.
I'm happy to
All
chat
right.
about this all day long. Absolutely. I had started my business, Candy Event Consulting, in 2008.
Okay.
And then I moved back to Calgary in 2010, and we had just gone through a real dip in events, 2008 to 2010. And so when I hit the ground here, people were saying, well, good luck with an event company here in Calgary at that time.
Yeah.
And you happened to be on the radio, and you were part of
It was unconventional panel.
Unconventional panel.
Yeah.
And you were saying, and I think they were talking about events and where events were and where they were at the time. And you said something like, you may not remember this.
No.
I remember this. And I was like, oh, there's still a hope. But you said, live events aren't dead. We just have to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of those things that for me, in my whole career, having planned events all my life, and now coming through this pandemic, we are in this very different world of events, but the idea of gathering people together is so important. So that was one of those. I always remember you as being my champion. Okay, we're still going to do this. I'm moving to Calgary, and I'm going to keep going with the business. And
yeah, I mean,
it happened.
I'm glad you said something nice, because one thing I think sometimes I did that panel for 5-6 years, almost every Wednesday, and sometimes you just have to have an opinion about something. And so sometimes people would be mad at me. I'd be like, please don't hold me to what I said. I needed to say something different. But no, that's true. And what's interesting about that is I wasn't really working in the event space professionally yet. So it was, I guess it was a little intuition, and definitely, I think I've been planning these types of events that I do, I'm going to say 10, 12 years now. So timeline wise, maybe I also inspired myself.
Oh, I love that. That's so awesome. Sometimes we speak it into being, right?
Yeah,
Let it
exactly.
be.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we will get into all of those amazing things that you are working on now and have been, like you said, for many years, and how it's expanded, and the fact that you are now living outside of Calgary and you've got a whole other circle of people, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um, where I love to start this conversation is really to dig a little bit deeper into who you are as a person, but more specifically, what does connection mean to you? Because when we talk about connection, it's one of those buzzwords, and especially after we all hit that event wall in 2020, 2021, and we're talking about, oh, we're so disconnected and now we've got to reconnect, and it gets thrown around a lot. And it's really important to me through all of these conversations that we start to see different perspectives on
Mhm.
connection and what it truly means to an individual, because that's when we can start to see in our events, how do we start to understand where we're building with connections first, but we're actually seeing people and the humanity and all of it first.
Yeah.
So can we
Yeah.
start there? Are you open to that, to share what connection
Yeah,
means to
be
you?
great. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I love these chats because I'm sort of this person who my career has just always evolved. And so, I went to school in New Brunswick for a degree in Spanish, and I have a degree in education. I don't use either of those, but then I moved to Calgary and just worked regular jobs at a bank, at an oil and gas firm, just trying to figure out, what I wasn't even really thinking about anything. And then I started writing a blog, and this was 2005, 2006. And that really was sort of ground floor for blogs. And it sort of reignited this passion for writing I always had as a kid. Like I wrote full stories. I sold my short stories to my classmates in junior high school because they were just so easy for me to write. And so writing for me was always relatively easy, but didn't seem like
Hmm.
there was a way for me to make a living at it. And then blogging came, and that sort of took over my life. And then that's where the CBC came from. And I had a column in a newspaper for 7 years. All of these things were not things that I planned. I was just sort of saying yes to every opportunity. And then that turned into like professional content creation. And I am getting to a point here. And the content creation was where I really started realizing I had to make sure I always had an exit strategy, or I always had another thing coming up, because I remember being one of the first content creators, like on a press trip somewhere to a, wherever, a vacation type location or something. And I was the only, like, I would call it new media at the time there. So it was all traditional journalists with their pens and papers. And I remember being like, well, I'm the new one here, and I sort of know this trajectory. So someday I'm going to be the old one here. So like there's always going to be a new technology, new content creator format. And like I think one time when I saw a content creator come with like their own film crew, I was like, oh, I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. Like this, I I'm now the veteran. I do not have a film crew. So that in turn, that sort of making sure that even if something's good, sort of preparing for the next step has been something I've
Hmm.
carried with me from that. I remember that first press trip and thinking about that. And that's definitely come into play with moving, with which is not something we really ever talked about until the pandemic sort of said, hey, anyone can live anywhere for the foreseeable future. And then even with our events, and as we're growing and as we're expanding and different things, it's always like, am I building the proper base for this? How can someone or something or some virus take out our base, and like what would we do next, kind of thing. And so it's a lot of it is sort of just preparing for what's next. And that's sort of how we've
Hmm.
ended up here today, I think.
Amazing. And so connection in the middle of all of that, like are you finding that there's a thread through the connections you were making that were leading you to opportunity to, well, from the outside it looks like opportunity to opportunity. Maybe you
Yeah.
were getting bored and wanted to try this and you're seeing things open up. So then it just becomes a chance for you to try something new. What was that like for you?
I think when we moved, so I called myself basically a professional Calgarian. I was making a living by talking about Calgary, by being in Calgary, whether it was on the radio or the newspaper or my own content creation. And so when the pandemic came, it was a really interesting moment for me and my partner too. His business is very Calgary based, and both our businesses still succeed in Calgary, even though it's been almost 4 years, which is wild. But when we moved, we really had to sort of say, like, hey, what are we good at now? Because all of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
no one in the cities we were living in, we did Halifax first, and now we're in St. John. No one was calling us to work with us like we did in Calgary. I hired a career
Mm-hmm.
advisor before I left to be like, what's my pitch? Because in Calgary, people would often just call me, like, I felt like a jack of all trades to people. And so they're like, can you
Mm-hmm.
do this? And I was like, sure, I'll figure it out and I'll do it. Hosting an event or producing an event or, whatever, what have you. And then all of a sudden we're in cities where no one knows who we are. And so I really spend a lot of time reflecting on, like, what is it? What's the common thread in everything I've done? There must be something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's community, from an early age. I'm gonna probably high school. Like I was always on the committees that brought people together. So I was on the Safe Grad committee. In university, I planned talent shows, but the talent shows were anyone could be in it. You like if you thought that was funny, and you want to do that in front of 400 people. Like that was sort of my thing. Like I was like, who am I to say what's funny? I mean,
Right.
not being offensive or anything like that, but like if or who am I to say you're a good singer or not? And this was early American Idol days. And so I think there was definitely that people wanted to be mean. And I was like, no, like, and also you can pay if you want, it's free if you want, bring food if you want. I don't like for food bank, I don't
Hmm.
care. I really just liked bringing people together. And then I would sort of look back at my Calgary career, and the blog really took off when I started talking positively about Calgary, positively about the Canadian entertainment industry, um, showing people what is all around them. My partner and I are people who, like, we have explored New Brunswick more than anyone ever, I think, and we've only been here for like 2 years. Like we just are constantly looking for things, and our friends here will say, we'll say like we've done more with you in New Brunswick than the whole time we've lived here, kind of thing. And so it's
Uh-huh.
always that stuff. I remember when there was debates about whether the police should be in the Pride Parade, and I was like, oh, I there's a movie that talks about that. I'm just going to rent a movie theater and people are going to come to it. And so we like sold it out. We had people talking. Um, a lot of what I do, whether it's professional or personal stuff, is gathering people. And so much of it is just being that person that books the theater, that books the movie. Um, so it's been hard for me to see that as a skill because that's intuitively what I like doing.
Hmm.
I think my favorite example is this was when a lot of there was around Black Panther, and when a lot of celebrities were buying up movie theaters and saying, hey, go to this movie for free, it's really good, kind of thing. And I was like, well, I want to do that, but I don't have money to buy a theater. And so for me, that movie Love, Simon came out, and it was sort of the first big Hollywood movie about gay relationships. And so I just did a GoFundMe, and
Hmm.
the director of the movie, very famous, he like within a day found out about it and just paid for it all. And like kids came, and we had to print off fake tickets for people because their parents were like, you better not be going to that movie. And like, so
Yeah.
like it's these big things in theory, like they generate news, but all I'm doing is booking a space. All I'm doing is creating the page. And so that stuff seems very natural and very easy for me. And I'm happy to be the person that sort of leads that trajectory.
Mm. Because it's something or things that you are passionate about, or you're living, or you're understanding that there needs to be a voice for something. I don't want to say if no one comes, that's cool.
Mhm.
But I think there's a certain amount of risk that we take, that we have to be willing to say whoever's in the room and what we're attracting, because you show up and you and I don't know each other well. I've been following your work for a long, long time, but there is a sense that you're showing up authentically. You're showing up as who you are, and like you said, professionally and personally. And then those that appreciate you doing that are going to show up to things that might feel like a risk to them, but you're already stepping into the risk. You've already booked the venue, or you're going to be on this street, or you're
Yeah.
going to start this event.
Look, this is going to be morbid, but I fully know that I am going to die trying to save someone someday because, and not as a good thing. It's like I will always be that person that like will step in, will book that thing, will do those things. And it's sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but like I'm happy to like I in Calgary especially, not so much since I moved, but I used to host events all the time, and I wouldn't be as polished as the professional hosts, but I was sort of an everyman. Like it was very
Hmm.
easy. Like, oh, hey, I'm up here and like I know what I'm doing. I'm checking all the boxes, but I'm also just having fun and I'm going to be silly. And that's led to other things. I'm very lucky. I get to host a lot of the main stage of Calgary Expo, which is Comic Con for other cities, and I get to host the A-list stars and stuff like that. And so much of that is just me like being a fan and but also understanding how to do an interview and things like that. And so standing in front of 5,000 people doesn't bother me at all. Having coffee with a stranger is not something I could do. like like I was more nervous for
Maybe
them.
that's why you keep booking venues, because it's like, this is my happy place. So,
Yeah, honestly, like I'm fine on a stage, but like this interaction makes me more nervous than say interviewing someone from the Marvel universe in front of 5,000 people. That doesn't I don't really even think about that because I'm like, oh, I know I can do that. And also, I set the tone in terms of, hey, we're just going to have a good time here. Nothing's too serious. Um,
hmm.
and events like that, like I'm very, very aware of the audience, whether I'm behind the scenes or in front of the stage. And so, like at a Comic Con, the audience members who ask questions are normally terrified. These are people who they have dreamed of talking to. They have their question written on their phone and they're reading it so slowly. Sometimes it's really hard to hear them. And like that's my job is to make sure that they are comfortable, that they,
Mm.
this moment, they don't look back on it with regret or I wish I should have said that. Or even if the question comes off as accidentally callous or rude or something like that, like my job is to hear it and be like, oh, I think what they were looking to say was da 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 da, right? Because I want that audience member to feel very comfortable. And I also want that audience member, I want the audience members listening to also know, oh, hey, even if I screw up, that guy's going to take care of me.
Yeah.
And that's not really something I've really articulated before in this conversation. I'm just sort of, I've been thinking a lot lately about
Mm.
like my role in my company, what
Yeah.
I'm good at. And it is, I think our events specialize in the attendee experience. That would hopefully our sponsors and speakers aren't listening, but like my number one priority. I mean, hopefully they are listening because it's a great podcast, but I think they know this, but my number one priority is always our attendees. One of the things I do is have like I have moles in each of our rooms. So I have either their pals or someone who said, hey, I'd love to come, but I can't afford a ticket, or hey, I'm in town, how can I help? And I just have them sit in the rooms and I'm like, text me if something's not right. I don't want to find out about issues later. Um,
Hmm.
so I don't want to find out about issues in reviews and things like that. So like, oh, the screen is off. I'm just trying to think of actual examples. Like there's a weird green tint to the screen. And like, I know that our speakers have spent lots of times on their presentations and they would be mortified to know it didn't look good. So fixing that, or I think sort of the famous example I often use is there was a panel and for whatever reason, and I know the host was really sorry, like no one had asked the woman a question the entire time, and it was like 25 minutes into the panel. And the audience noticed and they were getting sort of ruffled. And so like I was getting text. So I like run into the room and I grab the microphone politely and I'm just like, oh hey, I have a question for so and so. And like the audience applauded and I explained to the host later, and he was very apologetic. He was like, I was just in a conversation. I wasn't keeping track of who I was asking
Mm.
and who I wasn't. But having those moles or having those people in the room and making it a priority for me to making sure that the audience is having a good time and is informed and is getting what they wanted out of the conference is number one, like far above
Yeah.
anything else.
Because I think you at the heart are an attendee. Like
Mhm.
you seem like the kind of person that gets energized by that kind of experience. When you're having a good time, you can make sure you're bringing everybody along in that great time. And so I'm sure people recognize that. And I would say that any sponsor or partner listening to this, and especially with where events have gone, the big buzzword now in events is engagement. It's been something I've talked about for years, but we're in a place now where everything was turned upside down and shook around, and now we're saying, well, what does engagement actually look like? And I think what you're describing is exactly the heart of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think gosh, like there's so many things I want to talk about with what you just said. I think one of the reasons we survived the pandemic was because we had built this community. We had sold about 500 tickets, and if we to our events by time March 2020 had come, and if if everyone had asked for a refund, we would have been sunk because so much of that money had already been invested in advertising and costs and stuff like that. And so we wrote an email just saying like, hey, we're switching to virtual. It's totally your call. We will give you your money back. And 80% of our people stuck with us. And that saved our company. Well, so many similar events like ours tanked. And no, that's not to say that they didn't do something right or wrong. We just moved very quickly and we're really honest. And I think we had built up a reputation of like, okay, I don't know what a virtual conference is, but I like Mike's events, and I'm probably gonna check it out. And a lot of our attendees are professional development, so they're like, well, it's not my money anyway, I don't care. So that helps. And then with the speaker lineup, like as a gay person, I not so much anymore, but I definitely noticed when I was being asked to be the gay person at a conference, checking boxes. Oh, we need a gay person here, and now, like as a gay white guy, like we're on the bottom of that totem pole. No one wants at any of that, which is fine. But when I'm building a schedule, I'm very conscious to make sure that if I'm asking someone that isn't a straight white guy, they know that I'm not asking them because of XYZ. So having different types of speakers already lined up before I approach someone who doesn't know what we're up to, so they know that they're not being asked because they're queer or because they're racialized or anything like that. Like that's all stuff from my experience of being asked to do stuff and going back to it as an attendee. So we financially struggled for years more than I realized because I don't really go to conferences. I just started planning them. I only need $3.99 for a ticket, or I only need $2.99 for a ticket, and like, oh, $400 is a lot to me. So at a $400 conference, I expect this, and that the industry is $2,000 for a quarter of what we're providing, but I was coming at it an attendee experience. And so we've raised our prices over the years. We're still below 1,000 for even our biggest events. Some of our smaller events are still $299 and $399, but that's because I want people in the door. And now I see it as my responsibility to look for affordable speakers. And we also pay all of our speakers. No one works for free in our company. We also and writer sponsorships, and that's one of my selling points when I'm talking to sponsors, is like, hey, we're trying to keep the price point low. Like your money's not just going in my pocket, it's going to keep price point low. So this attendee first approach is definitely something that I think it's harder, it's slower, but I really like the foundation we've built, and it gives us capacity to try different things, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, but we still have that base that we can go off of.
And a base that's growing with you. Like they are not just through the pandemic and they said, yeah, we'll take the risk and we'll go online with you and we'll experience whatever that's going to
Yeah.
be. But it does seem like you like even shifting locations for yourself, your partner, like where you're now in a different community. But it does seem like even the fact that I feel like Calgary's still home for
Yeah,
you,
yeah, yeah,
that you're still so engaged in the people that have been with you for a long time,
yeah.
and
I
don't take
still get
those things
asked
for granted.
Yeah, I still get asked for
Yeah,
like connections in Calgary. Like, hey, do you know who works at this hotel? I'm like, yep. Like I now I'm in tune to like five different cities. And I think I'm honestly happier than ever because I think that maybe for
yeah,
years I was sort of like, I don't think I am a one person, one city, 9 to 5 kind of guy. I think I am
yeah.
person. So like we've been in St. John, New Brunswick for 2, 3 years, and I wouldn't say necessarily feels like home because of roots, but we love it. And
Mhm.
I'm looking at the Atlantic Ocean while I'm talking to you, and that's pretty great. And then
Wow.
I'll be somewhere else and trying something else. And it's I think moving has sort of helped us grow because now I have different perspectives on different places. And so
Mhm.
Calgary is definitely the stronghold for our conference, but Halifax has always been number two. And now that I'm closer to the East Coast, like now that I'm in the East Coast, it's like I can build that one better. And Toronto, we have Toronto, Vancouver, Halifax. There's one more, Calgary, and then we're adding another city in the next couple of weeks for next year. So it's yeah, we've actually just last week, I don't see it necessarily. So just last week, a guy that specializes in online community building, he's like, you're missing out on so many financial opportunities. Like you already have it. You just need to bridge it all together. And I feel very lucky that people trust us and that people like us. And sponsors have now started reaching out on their own, which is definitely a milestone. It's not me sort of cold calling for years, like which is what I did, and convincing them that this event that isn't, most events like mine are put on by tech companies as a sales funnel. Mine isn't that. I have nothing to sell you. I'm literally just, if you buy a ticket, I'm super happy and I hope you learn a lot. And so that comes with challenges and other bonuses. But one of the challenges is I think is legitimacy. So because we don't have a big name attached to us, we struggled. I'm going to say past tense now. I'm going to move that into the past tense with people sort of believing in what we were doing. So often I invite sponsors to come. I'd say 90% of our sponsors are people who've come to our conferences and are like, oh, okay, we want in. And so even if they pass, I'll say, hey, do you want to come check it out? And usually they come on board because I'm so self-conscious as a salesperson. I sometimes wonder I'm not good at it because I'm like, I talk them out of it. Sort of. I'm like, well, whatever you want, I don't care. Da, da, da. But having them come to the space and realizing what a good event we have usually is sort of the winning ticket.
Yeah. And so those that are listening that haven't heard about Social West and East and everything around that, can
I
you
need branding
explain?
help. I need
Oh,
branding
there you go.
help.
No, I think you're pretty good.
Yeah.
What is it? Who shows up at it? We're talking about that audience experience. Who is your who's in the room?
Yeah, so the names can be a bit confusing. What we're trying to do is the company's name is SocialNext, and we put on different events. And so from this point on, new cities like Toronto and the other city we're going to announce, it's SocialNext Toronto and SocialNext New City. But the cities we sort of already established, like Calgary and Halifax, we're keeping Social West, Social East for now, just because I don't want to lose that name recognition that we've built. And then we have Social Pacific in Vancouver. And they are events. So they started as me teaching small businesses how to do digital marketing at the early stages, just because I know they still do feel overwhelmed. And then I sort of saw people taking advantage of them, oh, we'll do this, and no, we're not going to provide reports, and we're just going to post stock photos. But as a small business, sometimes you just say yes because you don't have time to think about no and who's going to do it after that. And so my philosophy was like, well, we'll just teach you. We'll just show you that it's not that hard, and show you how easy it can be if it's done with the right tools and stuff like that. And that turned into Calgary being a conference setting, and we've sort of grown every year. And so we just finished we finished our biggest event ever in June of 2024 with 850 people and 100-person wait list. Like we just didn't have room. And Halifax is about 400 to 500. Vancouver is 300. Toronto, we sold out our first event ever in Toronto with 3 months notice. So we announced it in January, and I think by March it was sold out for April. So I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with, hopefully reputation, but also we've figured out our messaging, and it really is for people who have marketing or communications in their job title. Industry, all industries. Size of company, all size of companies. We don't do VIP tickets or anything like that. We don't separate audience members based on how much money they have or things like that. If they self-select, that's their problem. I can't help them. But the Calgary Flames organization have spent more money with us than any other organization. And then we also have 50, 60 nonprofits there. And I love the idea of a small nonprofit who might work once a week sitting beside the head of marketing for the Calgary Flames, and who knows what those relationships could lead to, and who knows what they can teach each other and things like that. And so
Mm.
we sort of just have some principles, and our event is for everyone. So we always the first question we ask any venue is accessibility, and then making sure that we can do washrooms in a way that everyone feels comfortable. Those are like number 1 and 2 on our list. Nothing if it's a no on either of those, we just move on, because we want every single person to walk into our space and be like, oh, I belong here. Like, no one is better than me. No one is, we had the VP of Accenture come last year, and he said this was the best conference he had ever been to. And I was like, I wasn't being humble. I was like, oh, like, really? Like, don't you go to
Because
conferences?
you don't go to events.
I don't go to events. Yeah. But he's like, it's like you picked 30 people in the room to randomly speak. Like, no one has an ego in these spaces.
Mm,
And we felt that in Vancouver too. I think Vancouver could be known as being very cliquey and things like that. I don't live in Vancouver. I just follow certain people and thought they'd be great. So I invited them as speakers, and then other people came. And so, like, I wasn't following industry standards or industry rules, or the who's who kind of thing.
yeah.
And I typically avoid people who say they're professional speakers, or people who provide, because that's a different type of event. I
Mhm.
like to think of us as like a 2-day university, but like more fun than that. The community is a huge part of it. The welcome factor, the diversity of the crowd, in terms of income, in terms of company size, in terms of racial backgrounds, orientations, all that sort of stuff. They are meant for everybody, and the more people that can come, we make sure all our snacks are gluten free. We always
Mm.
make sure we have non-alcoholic products. We always make sure there's quiet spaces for nursing, and we get asked that, can babies come? I'm like, yeah, I don't care, and then we get applauded for that. Like, I can't believe you brought a baby here. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like, whoever wants to come. And if you have a problem with a baby crying, hopefully that person sort of realizes the professional situation, that, atmosphere that we're in, and they normally do. And, it all works out.
Well, and I think it's a different kind of connection, right? Like you start to see people for who they are. One story that was so funny from Calgary here, when you had your event here in Calgary, by the time this comes out, hopefully we are all settled in our water disruptions here
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Calgary. Oh goodness, you'll
For
have to
this
tell this
year?
story
Is it
for
for this
this
year?
year.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and a trip to the dollar store. Do you know which one
Yes.
I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Could you
So
tell
the
us a
morning,
little bit?
and so in Calgary, for people listening around the world, Calgary, the morning of our conference in June, everyone in the city got an emergency notice saying major water main break, no showering, no using water, anything like that. And this was probably an hour before our conference started, 2 hours. And hopefully I don't get in trouble for this, but like, when I heard I was in the shower when the emergency alert went off, and Calgary's weather is crazy, so it could have been a tornado, a flood, a fire, whatever. And I literally said, like, I hope that's a missing child. Like, I was like, please, because I was so scared of how it was gonna, and we'll see if that joke lands. But that is just a joke for anyone. So, like, I was like, oh crap. And I was like, we called the venue, and no one had ever heard of anything like this. And so we're like, well, we're just going to proceed. And if we do something we're not supposed to, and da, 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 da. But then it was later that morning, I think. Actually, now I don't remember if it was day 1 or 2, but I was like, I wanted to keep acknowledging it. So the first, as I was introducing the event, I was making jokes about it. Again, it's sort of that customer service thing where you can be in a busy restaurant, and as long as the server walks by and says, I'm so busy, I'll be right there, you could wait an hour. But if they ignore you, you get super angry. And so I
Mhm.
always try to address every elephant in the room. And so I was making jokes about it. And then halfway through the morning, I think I was like, oh my God, it'd be so funny if we handed out deodorant to people. A further joke. And so I contacted all these companies like within an hour, and I tried, and like no one could move that fast. I was like, hi, I need 800 sticks of deodorant in the next 2 hours. It's going to be a big social media win. Anyway, none of them could do it. So we went to the Dollarama, and I was talking to a guy. He's like, well, I'll do it. He's like, my company will pay for it. And so we went to the Dollarama, and we just swiped literally, and we just handed It was a 30-second joke. Like, it was just a joke, but here we are 6 months later, still talking about it.
Yeah.
We're really nimble. Like, we do lots of fun stuff. That same venue is sort of notoriously, there's two things. They have prints on their walls that some people in our community might find uh distasteful for lots of different reasons or make them feel uncomfortable. So what we did is we worked with one of our favorite artists, Mandy Stobo, and we asked the venue, and she basically painted us giant stickers, and we covered the pictures but kept the frames, but it was all like colorful art. And then if anyone said anything,
Ah.
we were like, oh no, we just wanted to brighten up the space, kind of thing, because they were like black and white and dark red. And I was like, this is a weird mood for the venue. And then the venue decided to do that on their own, so those original pictures aren't there anymore, and they've been replaced with giant stickers. And then
Wow.
the elevator was really, really slow. It's number one reason why people don't choose that venue, because it's so slow. And so it's traditionally a wedding venue, so it doesn't matter that
Mhm.
much. But for 800 people going in and out, it matters. And so we worked with the YMCA 2 years in a row. We deckled this entire six-story staircase with words of encouragement, with YMCA branding. We had YMCA staff there cheering them on, blowing fans on people, and we're like, you can take the elevator, don't worry about it. If you want, you can take the stairs, and when you get to the top of the stairs, you get a ballot, and there's all these boxes, and you can put in as many ballot every time you take the stairs, you get a ballot, kind of thing. Oh, you can't do stairs, great, go to the YMCA, do a silly dance, and they'll give you the same ballot, kind of thing. And so making sure no
Mhm.
one was left out. But I think the first time we calculated that people climbed the equivalent of the Calvary Tower like 18 times or something like that. Like, it was, people really, really liked it. It takes more work, but we made it work. We made it memorable. And so we're sort of used to being in non-traditional venues and having fun with it. So we were somewhere recently just looking at a site, and you could tell the person was sort of saying, like, I know it's unconventional, but I was like, skip that. I don't care about that. But I was like, we figured all that out before. Like, let's talk numbers, let's talk whatever, but don't worry
Mhm.
about being a different type of venue, because we are used to that by now.
Yeah, when people start to see what's possible, allowing ourselves to explore and not just risk, because sometimes risk has a negative connotation, but there is that dreaming and understanding and seeing evidence that something like that is possible. And when you talk about the deodorant being like a 30-second joke,
Yeah,
um, aren't we all looking for that little hiccup in our day or that
yeah.
little something that just kind of throws us off a bit?
So we did it right after lunch, which is typically the hardest part of any conference.
Yeah.
People to back to get them awake. And so, like, as they were walking in, like, they were all having a chuckle to themselves, and things like that. And then just on the unique venues, because I'm guessing we're gonna go over time. I love talking about this. I could talk about it forever. But I would always suggest people, like, one of the reasons I think we succeeded at first was because we chose unconventional venues that are more affordable than
Mhm.
traditional venues. That those traditional venues have figured out every single way to get pennies from you. Where, like, so we started in small independent movie theaters, and we were just paying their day rate to rent a movie out, and they had their staff there at the concession, and so we had lots of fun with that. But, like, we often just, that's how we start in most cities, as movie theaters.
Mhm.
And as we grow, we go to bigger and bigger venues based on ticket sales and stuff. But that's, if you're thinking of starting events, if you're looking at for ideas, like, look to those
Mhm.
unconventional spaces, talk to them, because often they're like, yeah, let's do that here, and they'll try different things with you. We've looked at parkades before. We've looked at empty, like, skyscrapers. We looked at, in Calgary, they were renovating this whole skyscraper, and I was like, hey, before you put walls in, can we do our conference there? And yeah, the only reason it didn't work was because you don't realize how few bathrooms
I
are
was gonna say.
in buildings once all the floors are out. You're like, oh, this floor is only supposed to have 100 people on it, so there's only 2 or 3 bathrooms. Uh, you know, I hope someday that we can land a really big sponsor where, like, I can have a lot of fun, because my brain, I'm looking at the Digby ferry here, which is the ferry that takes you to Nova Scotia to New Brunswick, and I've talked to them about having a conference on the ferry
Oh, I love that.
back and forth throughout the day. And
Uh,
like, I love all that stuff. I love having fun with different, but venues, whether they know they're a venue or not, is
yeah.
fun places to explore. And have a little creative. And people have been to ballrooms, people have been to conferences. They haven't necessarily been to a movie theater or an empty parkade or things like that. Like it's, you can have
Totally.
fun with it.
Well, and I think some of it is also just knowing your people, knowing who's going to show up. And if we're showing up and it is truly about that experience you're creating or the connection that you could be making with someone that's sitting next to you, the more we can provide things to talk about
Yeah.
or to surprise us pleasantly. One of my mantras has been for years, and I learned this the hard way, but that events should be affordable, repeatable, scalable. And that's
Mm,
something that for me, affordable doesn't just mean the cheapest and like a boring something. It
yeah.
just means that we're taking a look at what do we have available to us, our time and the money we have available, and not using it as an excuse not to book the venue or not to book something or a if we have four walls, a few bathrooms,
Yeah.
maybe a kitchen and a sink or something, to really just take a look at what's possible. And that's also maybe where teams are really important too, because sometimes if we're feeling stuck or we're feeling like we can't do it unless we're in that ballroom or unless we choose, that type of an event, when we've got someone like you on a team or someone that is thinking outside of the box, then we can marry the logistics and all of those to-dos that you need for an event with maybe different choices around your food or your venue
Yeah.
or even the idea of having alternatives, whether that's mocktails or something like that for your guests. One of my culture commitments is to be playful. And so how are we playing with a plan that includes others in that planning as well? Your
Yeah.
team must
Like
be really active that way with you and your planning too.
my team,
Do you have a team?
no, I was gonna say my
So you
dog.
can just sign on that dotted line and just say, nope, the venue's ours.
The most terrifying thing I think people, I'll get, hey, can you ask Mike if this? I'm like, it's me. You're emailing me. It's just me. I mean, I say it's just me. I work with a great company outside in Calgary called 25th Hour. Her name's Lindsay, and she basically takes all my ideas and puts them together and like does the logistics of the events. But
Ah,
sole responsibility of the good and the bad of our events. It's just me. And I do say that. I say that when I'm talking to sponsors. I'm like, because it's just me and Lindsay, we can move a lot faster than having a committee, than having a board. And
mhm.
sometimes I consult, people will reach out, hey, we want to run an idea by you, and I'll hop on a call. And I remember this was a few years ago, it was with a bank, and like 8 people came on the call, and I was like, what is this? And they're like, this is the planning committee. I was like, no, we're not doing it. Like all 8 of you can't have an opinion about a venue. Like someone has to be the venue expert. And I was talking to a mayoral candidate this week in Alberta, and he was saying like, oh yeah, I'm trying to do this venue. But this person says this, da, 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 da. I was like, who is the decision maker? You have to have a decision maker, because all these people weighing in, they don't know. Maybe they've never done an event before. Maybe they don't know all the factors you're considering. You're
Mhm.
thinking about media optics, you're thinking about accessibility, you're thinking about what if no one shows up and you need to make it look like packed. Like you're thinking about all these things that this person who's just casually weighing in isn't thinking about. So
Mhm.
um, I think that's definitely a pro. But I would say in the last year, I've definitely leaned on more and more people as these events have gotten bigger and bigger. It's like, okay, I can't know everything. What am I missing? What am I thinking about? And like recently I had like I did this with some friends who I think when you're like a solopreneur, your friends are sort of your coworkers. And so I sent them all Uber gift cards, and I had like a 2-hour virtual dinner with them, and I just laid out my plans personally, professionally, like, hey, like
Mhm.
messaging, and no one will be more honest with you than your friends, and just gathering feedback. And when I go to different cities, I was just in Vancouver last week, I meet with people who are doing stuff there, and I'm like, hey, what about this product, what about this, how, like, the question I had were people, I was like, hey, our venue's technically in North Vancouver, do I say Social Pacific North Vancouver, or does it matter? And they came up with all these rules. I'm like, it's Vancouver. I was like, I'm like, it's on the water. You can see Vancouver. I'm saying Vancouver. But having people, but I do think so many events get bogged down with too many people weighing
Mm,
in. And that doesn't mean you can't have lots of people
yeah.
working on it, but you have to have like decision makers be the final say on
Yeah.
certain things. And I'm fortunate that that's me.
Well, or fortunately, because what
Yeah.
you've created is really an example for so many people that are doing this themselves that
I hope
feel
so.
like,
Like, I think we're doing things a bit differently. I would hate to say the word disrupt, but I'm hoping that people are seeing that there's different ways of having events, different ways of having conferences, and that maybe
hmm
this conference that they've always spent $3,000 on that doesn't have free coffee and free internet, maybe they are, maybe they've things have changed and there's different types of opportunities. And I hope to be one of those for sure.
hmm the whole idea of somebody planning or promoting their own event is that you have to move beyond barriers. People that I coach, there can be this feeling like, well, we've always done this event this way, and this is, the binder we have, and this is the team we have, and sometimes it's really important to have somebody that we can point to, whether it's you or someone else, and but something so foundational like the venue. And
Mhm.
it's one piece of a big puzzle of an event. But if you start messing with or being curious about one area of your planning, it really does open up the door to what else could we either do or what could we remove to give us more time or money or something else where
Yep.
we make this a more meaningful experience for our guests.
Yeah, and the venue is so important. And this year for the first year, we sent out RFPs because we do things differently. So we're like, hey, like when I'm talking to venues, I'm like, look, we're not a company that has a budget line. Our items, our profit, our cash comes from sales and sponsorship. So you literally see all the money we have. You can charge us crazy amount, but we don't have it. So if you want us here and you want to have some fun, let's find a number. And if you don't, that's okay too. Like, don't make concessions and make me feel bad about it later.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also going to bring in sponsored product because we work with snack companies and beverage companies, and you're not going to charge me for it. Like, so we'll bring in 5, but then we promise to spend this much. And that's probably a lot. Honestly, a lot of our energy goes towards negotiating with venues because we're doing things a bit differently. Like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to pay $5 a cup of coffee for people because that's silly. And I worked in banquets for 8 years. That's a number, that's a silly number. Let's have a better conversation if you want this type of event here. And
Yeah,
so if you want us to showcase your event your venue can do different types of things, or, we'll, we provide professional photos and videos from our team. Like, we are contributing to you as well, like,
that's right.
and not just a one-way thing. And so, and we have the collateral to do that, but often reaching out and just saying like, hey, like we reached Calgary reached has a brand new event venue, so we reached out to the older venues and we're like, hey, what's up? And they're like, okay, let's talk, like, so probably at prices that we wouldn't have gotten last year. And so
Right.
uh that's definitely the biggest thing we've added to our RFP was like, our conferences are like, to sound like a Gen Z, like, our conferences are a vibe and we're being upfront with our money. You see where it is. And we just are looking for places that want to have fun with us. And lots of places don't, it's harder to find a place that does than it isn't. But when you do and it works and everyone makes money and everyone has a good time, then that's fantastic.
Yeah. And then you attract the right partners, right? That want to do, not just want to support what you're doing, but see something in their own vision or mission or something that they want to do, similar to the story of somebody saying, well, I've got the money, so let's go get the deodorant and let's do the thing. That playfulness and the ability to place your money on something where there's going to be an attention to not just detail, but to the things that will really enhance the experience for those that are attending. So, and
Yeah.
it seems like that is so much in the DNA of what you create, and the fact that you're doing this on your own, and what an inspiration that is to the people that are listening
I
here
mean,
today.
maybe. I mean, maybe. I think
I
there's
think so.
part of you has to love it, and there is risks. Like we did our first event in Vancouver last year, and I thought it was going to be a no-brainer because Calgary does really well, and Vancouver has even more marketers, and it like I didn't pay enough attention, and we basically took a year to recover from it. Even though we
Mm,
still had 300 people there, I was making decisions with Calgary in mind and not being realistic.
yeah, yeah.
And so there are risks. And one of the things I sort of tell myself is like we spend a lot on marketing. That's a huge part. But if the event is really good and people have a good time, I can spend less and less on marketing the next year because
Mhm.
the word of mouth and the repeat business and stuff like that. And so much of event planning is thinking about the next event. Um,
Exactly.
it's sort of like by the time the event actually comes, people are like, "You nervous?" I'm like, "Not like everything." No, I'm already looking at
Um,
next. This is Lindsay's job now. It's the speaker's job. It's the AV's job. All the people I've hired. I'm not actually in that moment. I'm already have moved on, and
mhm.
sponsors huge part of it. Like we're talking to sponsors for fall 2025. That world is so much moves so much more faster than sometimes our ideas, right? So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have to tell people like just book the venue and start figuring it out and know that the first year probably isn't going to be profitable. I mean, good for you if it is. Like you figured out some neat stuff. But it's really an investment in photos and word of mouth and platform and all that stuff for the next year.
Mhm.
Invite the special guests, invite the sponsors who you almost got but didn't get, things like that, and showcase it in a way that makes the year next year easier and the year after that even easier.
I love it. And I love what you're bringing to the whole planning. Like when you're saying you're planning for next fall, there's going to be a whole lot of, I call events connection points, but there's going to be a whole lot of things you're doing in the meantime that are going to lead you to that and other experiences across the country and maybe around the world someday.
Yeah. I know
Yeah,
we're
go
up there,
ahead.
but I've done things like, hey,
Yeah.
like I'm trying to get a coffee company to sponsor. And I saw that they launched a clothing line. So like I went and bought that sweater the first day. And like as soon as it came, I sent them an email of me wearing the sweater and like, hey, what's up? I've done that with an e-reader company. Like it's getting their attention is so tricky, but it's tricky, but it's also like have fun with it. And like if you
Hmm.
can get that one interaction, it usually leads to something.
Yes.
Whether that's them in the room. Our very first event, I'll let you end this after our very first event. We couldn't get a single tech company. We finally got someone from Twitter who agreed to come to the reception, not to speak, like would just be in the room. And we marketed that. We're like, someone from Twitter will be there. Come to that event, right? Like, so don't like any iota is something. And so go
Yeah.
forward with lots of ideas and you'll be amazed what happens.
Trusting that there is a whole, I think, a whole, I'll use the word community broader, but a whole community of people that if they knew that you were there, if they knew that you had this spirit, if you wanted to take a maybe a deeper look at and say, how could we actually start nurturing this part of our
Mhm.
event so that it does grow into a more playful experience or in something that maybe you can have a little more fun with?
And if your intentions are true, right? So to this day,
Hmm.
still my goal is still to give as much education to people as possible. And that just based on my decisions to to maintain that goal makes these events really, really good. And that's something that sort of has helped us grow into other cities. Like we sold 100 tickets to Social Pacific this year without even announcing a single speaker or anything. And I was like, and there was like one email. I was like, why are people buying tickets? Like, we haven't done anything. Like, there's no marketing or anything, but the reputation precedes us, or they're Googling and our SEO is better now, kind of thing. So
Hmm.
it's fun to see it grow, and each city has its challenges. But I think that's what keeps it interesting.
Amazing. Can I ask you one last question?
Oh,
Just because
yeah.
we've gone over time anyway, so it's all
Way over
good.
time. That's all my fault, and I
It, I love it. Well, and I love what you're sharing, and if you could see these connections kind of moving into a worldwide way of being, and I know that's really big picture, but That's what keeps me really motivated when I start to see how that ripple effect starts changing the game. And so, what would you leave with those that are listening today? Something that they could do today, but that might be just a way of looking at connections in the future.
So my partner and I are in St. John. We've made a few friends, but we're both like, we need to do more. And my favorite thing to do is to interview people. So we're like, okay, how can we? Anyway, so we've now started this film series called Foggy Docs because St. John is so foggy. And we reached out, we scanned the movies of hot docs. We found a venue of 100 seats, super affordable. We found 5 documentaries for like $200 each because they're just happy to show their movie. And at the end of each movie, I'm going to be interviewing them for 5-10 minutes, the person that made the movie, like live stream in front of the audience. And so it checks all these boxes. It's community building. It doesn't cost a lot of money. If 50 people come, we cover our costs. And that's like, are people like, are you film buffs? No, we just like watching movies and we like popcorn. And it's not, all we did was book a venue and email 5 directors, right? Like, so even if you want to dip your toes into community building, if you want to, or like me, like I run these big events. So these small events are, one, they're really easy for me to do, but they're also a little fun because they don't impact my bottom line at all. And I can just have a little bit of fun with it. And hopefully we'll make some friends, gather some people. And that's sort of the goal of everything I do personally and professionally, is just have community around me. So I don't know, just like it sounds simple, but like, just do it. Like, and if like, so many times with anything, we all spin our wheels and we don't even know if we like doing it. So you might as well just try it and try something small and see if you like doing it. And if you do, great, it's addictive. If you don't, you're not wasting your brain energy wondering anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Love it. Thank you. If somebody wants to learn about, well, you maybe continue the conversation about connection or find where they can attend an event that you are putting together, how can they find you?
So socialnext.ca lists all our events. I can't promise it's always up to date, but all the links to the websites are up to date. So
Perfect.
socialnext.ca sort of, and we do virtual events still, and we do webinars every now and then. And so there's always something going on. Just as a point, those online events are meant to sort of help people dip their toes into our events. So hopefully they that 90-minute session, like, oh, I guess his in-person events would be good. And so we're always coming up with different avenues to get people to see that what we're doing is fun and is engaging and is educational.
Thank you so much. Thanks for taking this time. It's taken us how many years for us to have this conversation?
Not even in the same city anymore, and it still took years, but no, it's great. I think the community is really lucky to have. I think a lot of event info is gate kept, is proprietary. It's treated like proprietary information, and I don't see the point in that. I think it's good to try, to help each other out and learn tips and, figure out ways we can make money, and to get venues to stop charging us $5 for a cup of coffee would be great. So
I think you and I are more on the same page than I ever thought we were. And I'm so looking forward to more conversations in time. Thank you again, Mike. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.